Good morning. Hope you had a great weekend. Happy Monday, and welcome to another episode of Tea and Coffee with Paula
Jay. And I'm just typing away here because our guest is nice and early, and we might actually bring him on before the 7:30 mark. We'll see. But it's good to see you, Jeff. As we get into the show, good morning, Paula.
Good morning, Jason.
Good morning, Paula. I'm a little flustered because we were just getting the tickets up for the event coming up.
Yay.
And I see our guest, and I actually think I might bring him on early because he's here. And then we'll have the other half of the show to talk about this stuff.
Yeah.
How about we do that?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so on that note, let's bring Jeff in right now. This is Jeffrey Rath. You probably know him. He's been around Alberta. Good morning, Jeff. How are you?
Morning.
Hey, good morning. It would pay me to actually read my text at 7:30, not 7. So.
It's okay. We got your audio. Yeah. You can hear us. It's a great start already.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, no, let's go ahead and do your interview first, and the first half an hour, and then we'll get into the rest of our show. Our guests don't mind that kind of thing. Yeah. How you been? It's been a busy week for you.
It's been an interesting week for sure, right? It's we record on Friday, and we already have instructions to file. Not that it matters because it's moot the minute Bill 14 gets passed, but we already have instructions to appeal Justice Feasby's decision from Friday because it's a very odd it's a very odd decision. But
well, let's go actually back a couple weeks or last weekend with the AGM. Sure. You kind of had this moment at the microphone. Do you remember that?
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I mean, of course, it goes back even further than last weekend. It goes back to how annoyed a lot of us were when Danielle thought it was a good idea to pass a motion at the UCP board to limit speech and debate at the at the UCP AGM this year. So she passed a motion apparently outlawing any debate on independence at the AGM because that was being proposed. It actually had been proposed by Rob Smith, and Danielle didn't want any part of that because heaven forbid that she learned that the overwhelming majority of her base, favors independence and that she's actually leading an independence party, right? She didn't want that to happen. So she passed a motion outlawing or prohibiting speech and debate at the AGM on independence and outlawed any resolutions or prohibited any resolutions coming from the floor specifically dealing with independence. So a lot of us were kind of annoyed about that, but she said, I'm not limiting speech and debate. People can still come to the microphones and ask any questions they want. So I took it upon myself.
You came to the microphone.
to take that invitation to come to the microphone, but to do the one thing that she didn't want, which was instead, and if you notice through the What's Next panels over the summer, she assiduously avoided doing, right? Which was instead of having a straw polls in the room, in terms of how many people favored, whatever little proposal that she was putting forward under, the What's Next panels, she assiduously avoided in any of the What's Next panels over the summer, asking how many people in the room fully favored, Alberta independence. So I thought it would be very beneficial to ask the 4,000 people in the hall at the AGM, whether in the face of Mark Carney running around bragging about how he hoodwinked Danielle and her cabinet and suckered them into a 600% increase in the industrial carbon tax, whether under those circumstances, people in the room thought it was a good idea for Alberta to become free and independent. And then, of course, you saw what happened. We got an overwhelming standing ovation in favor of a free and independent Alberta, much to the chagrin of Premier Smith and her cabinet. And then much to their further chagrin, anytime she mentioned her silly MOU with Canada, she got booed. She got roundly booed for entering into such a stupid deal, such a bad deal on behalf of Alberta. And of course, after I asked my question or made my comment about Carney and a 600% increase in industrial carbon tax, Danielle took it upon herself after they cut my mic off, of course, because heaven forbid that Danielle have an actual debate about Alberta independence after she herself had prohibited it at the AGM. After they cut my mic off before my time was up, she took it upon herself to tax-plain to the room how the industrial carbon tax works in Alberta. And of course, that was not my point, right? My point was that Mark Carney was bragging that he interpreted the agreement differently than she did, and was claiming to the world that he'd hoodwinked Danielle and her so-called negotiating team into agreeing to a 600% increase in the industrial carbon tax, right? And, what's really interesting about that is, notwithstanding anything that Danielle said at the AGM, it's a good deal because it's freed up our, our power grid, and we no longer have a net zero power grid. And, we did not agree to a 600% increase in the industrial carbon tax and blah, blah, blah. Ever since the AGM, Carney and all of his ministers have been going out of their way to make Danielle look foolish or look like a liar, right? So as an example, on Monday after the AGM, the environment minister, Ms. Julie Daboussin, from, wherever the hell she's from, let's just say Ottawa, Julie Daboussin decides that she needs to go on the record and correct what Danielle Smith was saying about freeing up the electric power, grid from net zero regulations. She said, "Oh, no, we did not agree to that. We agreed only that they could provide a proposal to us showing us an alternative, and provided that the alternative is acceptable to us, we will consider it," like that, right? So they made it, and then on Tuesday, Carney goes into the House of Commons again, and again reiterates exactly what he said immediately after the MOU, which is this: look, this MOU is a wonderful deal. We've negotiated a 600% increase in the industrial carbon tax. And then for all those people since the AGM that have been trying to, tax-explain to me online how industrial carbon tax works, Danielle's little trolls, right? But tax-explain how carbon tax works. The fact of the matter is, we collected, and she didn't extend the carbon tax and collected. Ottawa would be collecting it, and blah blah blah. Well, here's the thing, right? So Carney's claiming to everybody that he's got this 600% increase in the carbon tax. If Danielle does, under the way that the tier system works and under the way the carbon tax system works, if Danielle doesn't implement a 600% carbon tax that Carney said he negotiates, right? Come April 1, there's no negotiation. Carney can raise the carbon tax to whatever the hell he wants and collect whatever portion that Danielle doesn't want to collect provincially, federally, on the basis that Danielle and her team agreed to this 6 times increase in the industrial carbon tax, right? It's completely, it's just completely opposite of what Danielle thinks she negotiated. And I'm very concerned that, this so-called non-binding MOU is going to be just used to kill Alberta on a going forward basis, because Danielle can say, we didn't agree to that. And Mark Carney will say, oh, yes, you did. Look, here I was immediately after the MOU saying you agreed to a 600% increase in the carbon tax, right? You know how the federal Liberals work. They don't care about truth. They don't care about, anything other than the reality that they themselves create. So, you can't, this is the problem when you do a deal with the devil, right? I always say that the devil is in the details, and, Carney may well be making up whatever details he wants after the fact to the detriment of Alberta. And why should any of us be surprised? Because that's how they've operated forever, right?
No, fair enough. And one thing I just want to correct, Carney's not a Liberal. He's a shareholder of Brookfield. I believe that's where all his interests are lying, for sure. And what were you saying? Sorry, Jeff. Sorry. What were you saying when the mic was cut off? So what was the rest of what you had to say there?
Oh, you know what? I don't even remember now. That was so long ago, to be honest. But I'm sure it was more, along the lines of, what we always like to reinforce for people, that, Alberta independence is going to mean zero income tax for people federally, zero carbon tax, zero industrial carbon tax, zero corporate income tax federally, et cetera, et cetera. So that for every single, and again, this is why we say that independence is a nonpartisan issue. Alberta independence means at least a 33% increase in the take-home pay of every single Albertan, right, the day we declare independence, because all federal taxes and regulation will be gone, and Alberta will become one of the lowest taxed, lowest regulated, countries in the world. Which, if we have young kids that are watching, or young kids that pay attention to this stuff, and what by young kids, I'm talking about anybody under the age of 30, the only way that you're going to have a future in this province, and this is why we're doing it, is for our kids and our grandkids. The only way you're going to have a future in this province is if we get rid of the federal government. Because right now, everything that you make is taxed away The labor market in Alberta has been destroyed by flooding Alberta with people on temporary foreign worker visas, international mobility program visas, $88,000 a year federal refugees that literally giggle every time they go to cash a check, because our pensioners that have worked their entire lives for a Canada pension check get $1,200 a month. They get $88,000 a year, right? This is what Carney and the Liberals have turned Alberta into, right? So the only way, and that's what screws our labor market, right? So in normal supply and demand economic situations, right, if there's a shortage of something, like in this case, labor, what happens? Well, the price of labor goes up, right? So, instead of people being paid $25 or $15 an hour to work at Tim Hortons, they'd have to be paid $25 an hour or whatever it is, right? Because, labor becomes competitive, and it forces, corporations to pay their employees a living wage, right? And again, if the province wasn't flooded, or the country of Alberta wasn't flooded with all of these people on temporary foreign worker permits or international mobility program visas, we would have a glut of apartments on the market. So, kids could leave home at the age of 18. They could afford a place to live. They'd have to be paid a living wage. But of course, the large corporations that, are part of the World Economic Forum model of stakeholder capitalism, the multi-billion-dollar corporations that run this country, they don't want a free labor market, and they do not want a labor squeeze, because they benefit from bringing people over from the third world, with proof of a Canadian job offer, where these poor people are locked into working for $15 an hour for 5 years in a labor market that's being continually manipulated on behalf of all of the big box store owning, multinationals, fast food store owning multinationals, etc., who all benefit from having this never-ending supply of cheap third world labor that they keep flooding our country with. People that don't speak English as their first language, whose kids don't speak English as their first language, who then flood our schools, make it so that our teachers have difficulty teaching Alberta kids who speak English as their first language, because this is Alberta, right? Our kids can't get the education that they have a right to in our schools, because teachers are too busy dealing with all of the third world kids that don't speak English, have God knows what psychological problems from having been brought up in, Mogadishu or whatever hellhole war zone that they've been, drug out of, et cetera, in classes with our kids, endangering our kids' lives, ruining the education of our children, et cetera, which is all part of the Carney-Brookfield plan, right? So all of that, of course, would end with Alberta independence. There'd be no more flooding of our province with, the third world, basically, which is what's happening, which is, Carney and the World Economic Forum's plan for us. They literally want to have Canada's population be 100 million people. Who have they consulted here with that? I mean, Danny was buying it. She eats this World Economic Forum stuff with a fork and spoon, right? Not that long ago, she was on the Ryan Jesperson show, talking about how she wants to see the Alberta population double to 10 million. Like, who in this province wants 10 million people here? Certainly the First Nations people don't. Native Alberta, born and bred Alberta, Albertans don't want that to happen. Have our, national parks overrun, have our parks, in provincial parks overrun, city parks overrun, all of our, hospitals, you name it, completely overrun. Nobody wants that. But we haven't been consulted, but all these World Economic Forum types, oh yeah, absolutely. Let's flood Canada with the third world as part of our plan for, quote unquote, stakeholder capitalism, right? So anyway, that's, my rant on immigration for the morning today.
we got quite a few little topics here we want to touch on, and we got 15 minutes left, and I don't have a timer on here, and we don't mute here, so we let you go. But I do want to talk about the CBC headline that came out, the French radio headline that came out, where they misdirected or misrepresented what actually Danielle Smith said. They even dubbed French over top of her, so we couldn't even hear what she said. Now, here at the Levine Show, we contacted the Premier's office. We worked it out. We found out what was going on and released the truth. What was your thoughts about what the CBC did there? Is that just the first shot across the bow of the kind of misinformation we're going to see about what happens here in Alberta?
Yeah, and I'm sort of guilty of falling into that. I mean, I think I was on Bolton, and I've already apologized unreservedly to the Premier to the extent to which I did something I haven't done for years, which is to believe anything that I read on CBC.
We all fell for it. We all fell for it.
Right? Yeah. But that having been said, it wasn't just the headline. Like, I read the whole article. The whole article said that Danielle has announced that she's a Federalist and she will be campaigning for the federal side in any upcoming referendum. So that was right in the body of the article. And where I saw the article, I couldn't get audio because I understand French. I speak French. Je suis un franco-albertain, la famille de ma mère, c'est l'amoureux, so it's yeah. So, we're, I'm a Lamori. We were here, my family were in Alberta in the 1860s. My grandmother was born in 1896, delivered by a Cree midwife, not very far from the village of Lamoureux, or close to Fort Saskatchewan, in 1896. So, I mean, we have very deep roots in the province as Franco-Albertans. And, I would have understood it had we been able to hear the audio of the interview. That being said, I mean, I've issued an unreserved apology, but it's only it's a qualified apology because, of course, when Danielle says, I believe in a strong Alberta within a united Canada, she's leaving herself open to that kind of interpretation. What the hell does that mean, right? It's, I've told her it's not policy. It's a stupid slogan. It's something that she's got to stop saying because it leads people to the misunderstanding that she actually is on side with, Luke Kasich and Jason Kenney and all of those other, nice gentlemen that want to keep Albertans as tax slaves for the rest of our lives, and our children should remain in slavery for the rest of their lives, et cetera, right? So, you lay down with dogs, you get fleas, and that's kind of where Danielle's at right now. I mean, dressing up in her stupid little red blazer and white shirt like a Canadian flag and pretending that she's a liberal, Did you see how many times Danielle touched Mark Carney's hand when he came to Calgary? She was just so grateful that he came to announce that MOU with her. I mean, she was just all over herself, and all over Mark Carney. She was just gushing with gratitude, for him coming to feed us another piece of liberal bullshit that's going to destroy our province, right? So, Danielle, as much as I've apologized for it, I mean, Danielle kind of brings a lot of that onto herself, and to the fact that, CBC, I think rightly called her out for what she is, which is a Federalist, so be it. She may be neutral in the upcoming referendum campaign. We hope she is, or at the very least campaigning for independence, because it's the only thing that makes sense for Alberta. But, let's face it, she kind of deserves it.
Okay, no, and that's a fair critique for sure. And when Carney was there, he didn't really reciprocate. He just, as soon as the press conference was over, he just started stabbing her in the back and kneecapping her right away.
Yeah.
Oh,
you highlighted that.
Right? I mean, like I said, the ink.
But he's not a very good boyfriend, I'll tell you that.
The ink was not dry
No.
on the MOU before he rushes out to tell everybody how wonderfully he screwed Danielle Smith, by getting her to agree to a 600% increase in the carbon tax. Like, what else do you say to that?
Well, here's what came up with that one. So I had Rob Anderson and Mitch Sylvester on the show Friday, and Rob tried to sell the reasoning behind that. And what Mitch highlighted pretty clearly was there's yet another reason for Alberta independence, because what you're talking about, Rob, is oversight and regulations from Ottawa. So I guess you would replicate Mitch's statement there. That's one more reason to leave.
Yeah, I was really proud of Mitch. He did a hell of a job making Rob Anderson look foolish on Friday. So I thought that was really well done. Really well done by Mitch. But yeah, no, I mean that's it exactly. I mean, like, it's this whole idea, like, oh, we freed up our power grid. Well, wait a minute, Danielle. Our power grid was always strictly within provincial jurisdiction. Why did you allow any net zero bullshit to interfere with the operation of our power grid in the first place? I know it was the NDP that did it under Rachel Notley, but the day that Danielle got elected, she needed to completely roll all of that back and rescind, the Alberta coal ban, all of that stuff. She could have easily undone and done what Scott Moe did in Saskatchewan, which is tell the federal government where to go and how, and tell them that they have absolutely no business sticking their nose into the operation and delivery of electrical power in the province of Alberta. There's nothing wrong with burning clean Alberta coal as long as it's not putting pollutants up the stack, and the only thing that it's emitting is CO2. CO2 is good for the environment. It's good for our forests. It's good for our farmers. It's free fertilizer. Why is everybody so afraid of CO2? Other than it's a scam. It's a complete con. I mean, I've read articles and I've seen things from Princeton professors that say that we could double the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere to 880 parts per million, and the increase in global temperature would not be 1 degree, it would be 1%, right? So why are we going along with this foolishness other than it makes lots of billionaires richer, right? I'd like to know, like, all the companies that have been benefiting from all the government subsidies in and around, this climate change nonsense, how much their share prices and how much their, the value of these companies have increased since Al Gore started screaming about the oceans boiling, and the earth coming to an end in 12 years, 30 years ago, right?
Yeah.
So,
and by the way, Canada is a global leader in carbon capture. It's called forests.
Yep.
All of it, as far as I'm concerned, all of it's a fraud, and a free and independent Alberta will not be participating in this fraud. And the United States, who's our largest trading partner, is not going to, isn't going to require us to decarbonize our oil, to have 2 new pipelines to the Gulf Coast, and to have a pipeline through Idaho and Washington State to, to the west coast of Washington. There's going to be no decarbonization required. The only thing that we'll have when Alberta's independent is, free access to U.S. markets. And everybody needs to internalize the fact that 90% of Alberta's trade is north and south, right? We don't need the rest of Canada. The rest of Canada needs us. So the day that Alberta declares independence, right, all we have to do is increase our trade to the United States by 10%, and we've already replaced our trade with the rest of Canada, right? And we could do that literally overnight because, this is one of the reasons we're continually going to Washington. And I've got another meeting in Washington next week, is to continue to discuss what's going to be the shortest free trade agreement in the entire world, which is a 1-page document that says there's going to be zero, it'll be true reciprocal trade with 0 tariffs on all goods and services on both sides of the Alberta border, right? The Alberta U.S. border. People that are still selling this fear about, oh my goodness, Alberta's going to be landlocked if you become independent. We're landlocked now. We're
more landlocked now than independent.
We have nut jobs in British Columbia that won't allow us to have a pipeline to Tidewater. Even if we get a pipeline to Tidewater, Carney has still yet to pass an amendment, to the Tanker Ban Act. So what does that tell anybody that wants to invest in a pipeline, right? How can you invest in a pipeline where it's illegal to take the throughput from that pipeline out of the pipe at the end and put it into a ship? So effectively, you're asking the international capital markets to invest in a pipeline that has a hard plug on the end of it, where the oil can't go anywhere. I mean, give me a break. I mean, it's just more, BS from Ottawa, where they think that we're stupid and that we should all just follow. Oh, okay, you're going to go to the new pipeline, but you're not going to get rid of the tanker ban. Okay, that sounds really good to me, right? Like, the whole thing.
You're awesome first thing in the morning, Jeff. I got to tell you, you're awesome.
Yeah.
Now, another thing that we got from Ottawa are appointed judges, and you saw one on Friday as the decision came down on the APP question from a Liberal appointed judge. Can you kind of take us through that one too?
Well, for me, it's a very odd decision. I've worked my way through it now, and I'm going through it now for a second.
For people listening, you were the lead counsel for the APP on that.
Yeah. And what we got was this weird decision, which we already have instructions to appeal, where the judge says, in effect, well, we can't just look at what Mr. Sylvester is actually proposing, which is to simply gather signatures that may or may not lead to a referendum on independence. No. We have to look at the proposal, which the proposal is Alberta independence, not simply to have a referendum for Alberta independence. No, the proposal is for Alberta independence, and we have to we have to consider the proposal as if the Constitution was actually amended. Okay, so this is where it becomes key. So he says actually amended, and then if those amendments were to take place, those amendments would contravene rights under the Constitution because treaty rights would be different. Rights under the Charter wouldn't be the same because you wouldn't have a guarantee from Canada. Blah blah blah. Well, the one thing that he's forgetting about is in that one sentence, right? We'll consider this as if the Constitution was actually amended. Well, the only way to amend the Constitution is through a lawful legal amendment process, right? And if you lawfully and legally amend the Constitution, you do, by definition, do not contravene anybody's rights. So,
Right.
He gets into all kinds of analysis of, justification and Section 1 and Oaks and blah, 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 and all the stuff in this decision has nothing to do with the question that was in front of him. So, obviously, this is somebody that wanted to throw a pretty hard spanner into the works, in terms of, Alberta eventually, becoming free from Canada and, being able to move forward as a free and independent country. He even said that the treaties can't be transferred between Canada and Alberta because there's some sort of treaty right as to non-transferability of the treaties. Well, that was never promised by the treaty commissioners in any document that I'm aware of. And I have the most extensive collection of treaty-based literature in the country, right? Like I have archives full of, documenting the oral promises of the treaty commissioners, because when I won a case called Mikisew, more than a decade ago now, I convinced the Supreme Court that the oral promises made at the time of treaty form part of the treaty, right? And I told the court, I said, even taking that expansive view of treaty rights, and I assured the court that as somebody who's done this for years, I take the most expansive view of treaty rights of any lawyer in that courtroom, including all of the lawyers for all the First Nations, right? Because they don't understand the extent, because none of them have thought about, this, how Mikisew incorporates oral promises into the treaties, right? None of them pointed to a single oral promise that said, and Ottawa cannot transfer its obligations under the treaties to a province. Because if that were the case, then there'd be no reason for the province to engage with First Nations constitutionally in and around treaty rights in the province. And again, I spent my entire career making sure that the province of Alberta is bound by the treaties, right? So let's take a step back. And this judge says, oh, you can't transfer the treaties from one sovereign to another. That's illegal. Well, okay, Judge, and I made this point to him. What about all the pre-Confederation treaties, right, in Canada? And there's a lot of them where the obligation for those treaties were passed from the Crown and right of Great Britain to the Crown and right of Canada. So there's no reason, and this is what I pointed out to the court, that were Alberta to become independent and become the independent Commonwealth of Alberta, and we were, retained our relationship with the Crown, right, that the Crown obligations under the treaties wouldn't continue in an independent Alberta after independence as had existed before. But the judge didn't want to consider any of that. He just has this, and it's kind of, odd reasoning as to how he gets there. And again, it's assuming the worst, coming up with the worst possible hypothesis, to justify what he was doing, to come to this conclusion, that, oh, you need First Nations consent in order to, for Alberta to become independent. I mean, that's completely out of line with Canada's constitutional history. The treaties themselves, are not contracts in the normal sense. And I can take you to all the law in the Supreme Court and elsewhere that says that, right? These are solemn obligations entered into by the Crown. And, if Alberta were to remain, and there's no reason it wouldn't, because keep in mind, the Crown of Alberta is going to be negotiating independence with the Crown of Canada in the same way that the Crown of Canada negotiated independence with the Crown of Great Britain, right? So, all of this concern about, about somehow treaty rights or the judge coming to the conclusion that First Nations have to consent, at the end of the day, from a constitutional perspective is just wrong, right? Section 35.1 itself requires, as part of the constitutional amendment process on independent, or whether it's independence or otherwise, that a constitutional conference be convened and that the First Nations have a place at the table, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
for me, and this is as a First Nations advocate, on behalf, like of First Nations, I'd say, wow, what an incredible opportunity for you. Come to the table with all of your grievances, because we all know that Canada's been screwing you left, right, and center since the day they asserted that the treaty was in force, in this territory. Every promise that they made has been broken. Even things as basic as treaty educational rights, which, is quite clear under Treaty 6 and Treaty 8, in terms of the oral promises and otherwise, include a right to post-secondary education, right? And we have court decisions that say that, and we have, clear evidence from the treaty commissioners that was what was intended, et cetera, right? That's not delivered as a right. If a First Nations person in Treaty 8 or Treaty 6 goes into a government office and says, hey, I've got all my courses done, my upgrading's done, I'm approved to go into, whatever, could I please, have my money to go to school this fall? The bureaucrat, will look at them and say, oh, no, I'm sorry, our funding envelope has been entirely dispersed for the year. We don't have any more money for post-secondary education. Good luck, come back next year, right? So is that a right? At that point, that's not a right. I mean, that's, a government granting something as a privilege, providing there's enough money, right? So, there's lots of things like that where, the government has violated the treaty. But then the other thing that people need to understand is the treaty rights themselves, even on the most expansive view of treaty rights, which is what I hold, let's look at an oral promise under Treaty 8 that, you will be as free to carry on your mode and way of life throughout the tract surrendered as if you never entered into treaty, right? And what the court is saying, oh, well, an international border would make them less free to cross the border. Well, you know what? A stop sign, makes you less free to carry on your mode and way of life throughout the tract surrendered as if you never entered into treaty, right? A traffic light, a speed limit, where does this stop? Right, in terms of is the most if you have basically an open border between Canada and like Saskatchewan and Alberta after independence, or Northwest Territories and BC for treaty people, you just have to you literally, I think, would just have to show a treaty card, because you'd have a Crown of Right of Alberta on one side of the border in the independent Commonwealth of Alberta, you'd have the Crown of Canada on the other side. You're both bound by the treaty, right? So why would you be hassling First Nations people about firearms or or a dead moose or whatever it happens to be, right? I mean, just carry on with, carrying on your mode and way of life. But again, let's think about that mode and way of life provision and the limitations of it, right? If you're in jail for first-degree murder, right, can you hold up the treaty and say, my being jailed for first-degree murder, is a violation of my treaty right? Because the treaty says I'm free to carry on my mode and way of life throughout the tract surrendered as if I never entered into treaty. Of course not. No court in Canada has ever interpreted, a treaty right that way, right? Obviously, the criminal law applies, and that was one of the points that was brought up by, by Alan Adam was, well, what if you have a criminal record, right? Well, people in current Canadian society, if they have a criminal record or if they're out on probation or parole or whatever, they have restrictions on what they're able to do, right? That's a reasonable restriction of a treaty right, always has been, so, this judge went, and I tried to warn him against doing what he did. I think he went way too far. Didn't consider the way treaty rights actually work in society, didn't understand that there are a lot of inherent limitations on treaty rights. And then he doesn't understand how rights are exercised in a treaty context, because there's a case called Desautels at the Supreme Court, which makes it clear that treaty rights actually and Aboriginal rights span international borders. That was a case involving Salish people from southern from northern Washington being able to fish in BC. Supreme Court says, yeah, absolutely, right? I mean, the imaginary border lines do not infringe or impact on treaty rights. But if you're going to, exercise your treaty right while carrying 40 pounds of fentanyl, well, of course you can be stopped, right? And have your fentanyl seized and be subject to some form of, of punishment on whatever side of this imaginary line that you're crossing, if, people have probable cause to believe that you're, smuggling, drugs for the communist Chinese, which, we see a lot of people in Canada are now doing, right? So, I think the judge, unfortunately dipped his toe into waters that he was not overly familiar with. He came to a bunch of conclusions that I think, aren't supportable at law, and will be the subject of of further judicial intervention if the Court of Appeal will even hear us, given the fact that Bill 14, once passed, will render that entire decision moot. Right.
So you saw my notes, because that's where I'm taking you next before we let you run, is Bill 14. Now, the one part of the decision I really didn't like about this judge is where he highlighted that Bill 14, what he called was against the rule of law, where what he's trying to say is the court has supremacy over our laws, which they don't. It's the legislature. And this is even what Nenshi stood up and said. He goes, why are we taking away the power from the court? They have the supremacy. That's not true. Do we really want a society? Do we really want to decide where one person decides what the laws are?
Well, in fairness to the judge, I think what he was saying was he was expressing some frustration with the manner in which the legislature sought to intervene in this court case, right? So, he's not saying that the courts are supreme over the legislature. And I think that if there was a constitutional determination of the issue as to whether or not what the legislature did was constitutional, there would be a determination that what the legislature did was in fact constitutional. I think what the judge was frustrated about was that the legislature waited until the 11th hour, to after, literally, the docket had been cleared by the court. The court had bent over backwards to resolve the issue, sooner rather than later. On a very expedited timeline where all of the lawyers and everybody involved in this case were literally working around the clock to meet very punishing deadlines to produce thousands of pages of a very high level constitutional argument. So the judge was expressing some frustration or irritation with that, right? I don't think he's saying constitutionally that the courts override the legislature, the courts are supreme. He was just expressing, his extreme frustration with the legislature that, that they came in at the 11th hour to do this. I mean, let's face it, they could have done it, very early in the legislative session and saved everybody a lot of time and trouble and heartache. But for whatever reason, maybe Danielle didn't want to annoy her new boyfriend, Mark Carney, and upset the MOU negotiations or whatever the reason was that they waited so long to do this. I think that's what, in fairness to the judge, the judge was expressing, his frustration. Right. And then you have to ask yourself too, like, to what extent, this entire judgment, is colored by the fact we have a very annoyed judge who, was very unhappy with, the legislature legislating this case out from underneath him. And, I'd like to know how many pages of this judgment were drafted between 4 o'clock on Thursday afternoon when he got the letter from the province and 10 o'clock in the morning on Friday, when he, obviously a very tired looking judge, came into the courtroom to express his extreme displeasure with the government of Alberta for what they did, within their proper legislative jurisdiction. So
now let's let people know what Bill 14 proposes. It's done the first reading. It's likely going to pass. We expect it to pass. What does it do that upsets the judge? So everybody knows.
Right.
What is it
Bill 14 effectively says that this case is dismissed without costs and that the case is over, and that now Mitch Sylvester needs to resubmit or may resubmit his referendum proposal, his petition proposal the minute that the bill is proclaimed. So that's what we're waiting for. The minute the bill is proclaimed, we're going to have an application in to Elections Alberta, hopefully allowing APP and Mitch Sylvester to start gathering. Apparently now we're up to 436,000 pledges for signatures. Wow. For a referendum on a constitutional referendum on our question, which I think is fantastic. So we'd like to take 120 days to gather 1 million signatures, right? So we can demonstrate to Danielle and the UCP how strong our movement is, right? And then hopefully we'll be having a referendum in the fall of 2026 after a very, strong, successful independence referendum campaign, through the summer months. We'll be barnstorming, like we already have a plan to, basically increase the number of town halls to 100 a week. We're going to be all over the province talking to people about independence, making sure people understand how much better off their families are going to be with a complete elimination of all federal taxation and regulation in the province of Alberta and so on. So, we're excited. There is one other aspect of Bill 14, if you guys have time, because I think this is really newsworthy and people need to pay attention to it, right?
You're talking about the nomination override by the
there's
leader.
a provision of Bill 14 that may, I understand, talking to several CA presidents, may be leading to an SGM and a leadership review of Danielle's leadership, because there's a lot of people that are really, really annoyed that Bill 14 contains a provision at page, I think it's page 37. I don't have the bill in front of me, but anyway, it's this odd little provision that nobody would remark on unless you're like a CA president and understand how it is that MLAs are become MLAs and they are able to run as MLAs after they're elected in their constituency associations, right? So, there's this provision that there are multiple people, that could sign the nomination papers of MLAs once they're nominated and ready to run. Well, what Bill 14 does is it changes it to make it more like the make the process more like the process of the Communist Party of the former Soviet Union or the Liberal Party of Canada, the two being kind of synonymous, where only the leader has the ability to sign anyone's nomination papers. So think about that. If you're an MLA that has not behaved him or herself and has been a bad little boy and girl that have not done everything that the nice leader tells you, and, like as an example, has held town halls on, entitled The Injection of Truth or The Courage to Listen, and, encourage people to debate, vaccine policy or independence or whatever against the wishes of the premier and the party, you might find yourself in a position where the premier refuses to sign your nomination papers, in the same way that, Trudeau, used that power very draconian fashion, telling anybody that had any aspirations of running for the, the Brookfield Party of Canada, that if they were not pro-choice, right, and if they had religious beliefs, they were pro-life, they believed in the sanctity of life, whatever, that Trudeau would not sign their nomination papers, right? So, in effect, Bill 14 has this provision that gives Danielle the same power that Justin Trudeau wielded like a club over, Liberal MPs or wannabe MPs. And a lot of people within the grassroots of the UCP think that that's anathema to the party as a grassroots party that believes in allowing its members to determine who's going to represent them. So, I mean, here's Danielle again, after, limiting free speech and debate at the AGM, again, wanting to have dictatorial power, over the grassroots and over, who it is that gets to run or not run, as a UCP MLA. And obviously there's a lot of people in the grassroots and a lot of CA presidents that are really upset about this, even CA presidents that are not in favor of independence. So, it's she's kicked over a hornet's nest with that one. And the only thing that remains to be seen as to whether or not she understands how angry she's made the base of her party and her constituency associations and constituency association presidents by trying to turn herself into Justin Trudeau vis-a-vis the rest of the party. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. And I think that's one that we want to pay attention to.
Yeah, from my understanding, there's going to be a bunch of nominations in the spring after the new lines are drawn, and there will be likely a new slate of candidates coming forward. So we'll see how that works out. And we can debate this one some more in a bit, Jeff, because I'm going to have, it looks like Mickey Amory on tomorrow, Rob Smith on Wednesday, and Glenn Blackjet from the JCCF on Thursday. Talk about all of this right now. So maybe we'll have you back next week or so to see what we're talking about at that stage.
Yeah, no, I'd be very interested.
Okay, one quick question, sure.
I'd be very interested in hearing what Mickey Amory has to say for himself on that score. I'm sure they're going to try to solve. Oh no, blah blah blah.
Well, I'll have Bruce Party on as well against him, so we'll see how that works out for tomorrow. So it'll be Bruce and Mickey tomorrow.
Yeah.
So
there's been a back and forth going on in our locals chat where what's the difference between having a republic and a commonwealth? And so
we don't have time for that question. Like, I'm sorry, we're already way over time. Yeah, we really don't. We should bring Jeff back before.
Oh, that'd be great.
Yeah, we'll bring Jeff back for that particular question because there's so much like value of freedom. There's the constitutional drafts. There's a whole much more that we can go in with Jeff, but we're already 15 minutes over.
We are.
So, well, Jeff, can you make a commitment in the next couple of weeks before Christmas? Maybe we'll get you back one more time.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to. Just so that you know, I mean, we're there's going to be we're going to be generating lots of news here over the next week or so. So pay attention. You'll probably want to have me back on to hear, to talk about some really big breaking news that we'll probably be announcing next week. So. You're
awesome, Jeff, and we'll keep that open for sure because we like having you back. I don't have to say much. I just hang out with you with the whole show. So, Jeff, thank you.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, and next time it is 7:30 because then we can get everything else out of the way, and then we can stay.
Yeah, my apologies for that. I don't know what my problem is. I read text on my phone without putting my glasses on, and 7, okay.
No apology needed, Jeff. That was a great way to start the Monday. So thank you for your time today, and keep up the hard work. And we'll talk to you soon. Okay?
Yeah, you bet. Over and out. Okay, bye.
Bye.
I can't read text on my phone without my glasses.
Yeah, you're half blind now. Yeah. Yeah. Tell me you're old without saying that you're old. Got it. Heard you. Okay, so folks, that was a lot of information. There's like a fire hose when Jeff comes on. I don't know what coffee he drinks or tea or both, but he definitely had a lot of energy this morning. But we'll bring him back because that Commonwealth question is a very valid one. And I didn't mean to cut it off. But if we threw that to Jeff, that's 15 minutes right there.
Yeah.
So and we don't want to rush that particular question because it really needs to be explained.
Yeah.
And it would have taken a long time. So I appreciate that question.
Yeah, the back and forth in our locals chat was really that basically if you went for a Commonwealth, you're guaranteed to still have a WF
well,
influence.
I can quickly answer that one only from my conversation with Jeff is he doesn't mean under the king. He just means part of the Commonwealth for trade. There's many republics that are part of the Commonwealth for trade. It's not governed by the king anymore, but I still don't like the idea.
Yeah.
Okay, full stop. I still don't like the idea. I want republic, full stop. And Jeff has also answered that question once before. He said it's not up to him to decide. It's the Constitutional Convention. That's when that's going to be decided. So even though he has his ideas and his preferences, and he said this on a show before, his preferences, he's not the king. Okay, so King Jeff is not going to actually lay out exactly how things are going to work. He's going to provide his input. It'll be a constitutional convention with First Nations and every other group that has an interest in this will be there. All right. So when people kind of get all worked up over APP's conversations today, they're not our forefathers. They're not laying out exactly how things are going to be. All they're doing at this stage is educating people on the value of independence and getting the referendum to the table for us. They're not creating the rest of it at this stage. So please look at it that way.
Yeah, and education is still key. I was speaking to a friend last night who went to the gun show in Edmonton yesterday, and she was saying that there are still some people who are clueless about separation and didn't even realize that this was a thing. So she was able to share some information and even get some signatures, from my understanding. But from what I can see, Medicine Hat, December 10th is the next APP meeting at 7 p.m.
Oh, there's plenty. There's like 3 or 4 a day at this stage now. So there's plenty. Do go to the APP website. You can check their X. They're posting all the time. And like Jeff said, they're going to be ramping up to like 100 a week or something like that.
Yeah.
Because the last time I talked to Mitch, he's like, we're going to get up to like 5 a day, like right away. Now that the court decision has been done and Bill 14's on the table, because people need to be educated. Because there's a lot of media coming out and saying, oh, look, they can't have it now.
Yeah, we can.
Well, no, actually, technically right now, as the law of the land stands right now.
It has to pass.
Correct.
It has to pass.
Correct.
And we can.
And I got some trouble. Some people are like, Jason, it hasn't passed yet. I said repealing.
Yes,
ING.
I saw that comment.
It's in the process of being repealed. Okay, we're expected to pass. And I do have comments about that last part where he's talking about the consolidation of the power to the leader. It's actually not as bad as some people are making it. So let's get into the news quick here, and we may have to get into that one tomorrow with Bruce Party, who's definitely coming, and Mickey Amory, who's invited, and his staff says they're going to try and make him come.
Make it work.
Yeah, so if it's not Bruce and Mickey, it's definitely Bruce tomorrow. And we'll be talking specifically about Bill 14. Bruce has gone through it. He was the one that warned everybody that Section 2.4 is going to stop you. He was correct. The judge agreed, even though we don't like the decision. And it wasn't that Bruce was saying, hey, judge, do it this way. He's like, hey, guys, be warned. It could go this way. And it turned out to go that way. So he'll be on tomorrow. Hopefully McHenry joins us. That'll be great. All right. So back to the news. And we are going to run a little bit late for everybody because we do want to get through some of these. As you saw, I think it was the end of here we go. So we are the ones who broke the story that CBC French was lying. And the way we broke that is I translated it, contacted the Premier's office. They contacted CBC, had them provide a correction. And then through pressure from us, our show, we got the English version and put it out there to clarify what was going on with that headline. And I'm glad to see other people are writing with it, putting it out there. And I don't even mind that they're taking the video and kind of taking credit that they did the work. They didn't, but I'm glad that this is being corrected. So thank you very much to everybody who's doing that. Nico did a great post here. Nico was part of my research on this because he speaks French.
Yeah.
So I had him go through the French version dubs and to see if they accurately and fairly translated her words. They did. So if you listen to the French, it was accurate. It was the article and the headline that got modified.
To CBC.
Yeah.
That's CBC Live.
It wasn't even the translator's fault. The translator was accurate.
Yeah.
Nico said, nope, that's very fair translation. It's after the translation, how they twisted it in the article and headline made it a lie. So thank you, Nico, for that extra work. So Detective Helen Gruce back in court December 18th, followed Donald Best for that one. Right now, what we're waiting on here is what they're going to do with all of those affidavits that were sent in, like 1,000 affidavits were sent in support of Detective Helen Gruce. The prosecution is trying to keep those off the record. So the last thing they want is it to be on the record because some of them are calling out the corruption of the Ottawa police, police autonomy, how this is wrong. A lot of them are current and former police officers as well. So they're going to try hard to keep those out of the court record or the hearing record, the tribunal record. So stay tuned for that one. Jason Kenney is a weird man. That's a weird man for sure. I think that's probably the best way to put it. Former Alberta Premier Jason Kenney says politician recall legislation being misused. Yeah, you're right. Jason, this is your policy.
Yeah.
He brought in this legislation in 2020 is when it was introduced. It was passed in 2021. He should have put in some safeguards. So I said, how embarrassing for Jason Kenney. He brought in a recall legislation that is now being misused. Maybe he should have put some parameters in. And what I mean by that is your reason for recall is not a testable thing. You can just say, I don't like his jacket, and that's enough. You can go ahead and put in a recall in. Pay the $500, collect the signatures, and he's recalled. What I don't like is how it's being used for political purposes right now. And it's not that the MLA did something wrong. It's the MLA did something that these people don't like, which was a legal vote in the legislature that said, hey, I support this bill. Let's make it law. That's the legal process. That's democracy at its best right there. So what I would like to see is some parameters put in place where it has to be something the individual did. It has to be a breach of public trust or against the criminal code. It has to be proven, not allegated. And I think even here is where the court should test the reason before it moves on to signature stages.
Yeah.
There should be at least a little barrier here that says, okay, well, why are you doing it? And if it's for public policy that you don't like, that doesn't qualify.
Yeah.
It has to be the individual did something wrong, criminally or breach of trust, and it has to be not alleged, but proven. So you can't just make something up.
Correct.
Or it can't be, oh, he's being charged, let's get him out or her out. Once the criminal convicted, yeah, go ahead. Like that's a breach of trust or criminal code, but there needs to be a safeguard there because this will just go back and forth. Like NDPers are going to be recalled the same way. This needs to be a fair system where democracy rules. The electoral vote was done, and we shouldn't have it so simple to go ahead and make. I think we're on 19 or 20 recalls now. They're going after 44 of them. And I think Danielle Smith is probably next this week. So we'll see if her recall is put out there. So breaking news that you heard here, the court strikes down Alberta's independent petition, but the ruling is now a complete nothing burger because, as you heard Jeff say, the decision was to disallow the question because the judge says it contravenes the Constitution. I find this so peculiar. One thing we didn't talk about with Jeff was the Clarity Act. The Clarity Act is from the Supreme Court of Canada that says under the Constitution and Supreme Court, you can have a referendum on separation. And then you have a negotiation. The negotiation stage is where you work out the details. What this judge did was preempted the Supreme Court. So I think under appeal all the way to Supreme Court, this would be overturned because the Supreme Court has already decided this. A province can have a constitutional question brought forward that leads to independence or separation. So I didn't like this judge's decision. I think he was just being political in my mind. Or if you want to give a silver lining to this judge and give him a little bit of credit, he was put within the defined legislation. So Section 2.4 shouldn't have been there at all. But if he was focusing just on that particular section and not the Supreme Court or anything like that, then maybe it was a valid decision.
Yeah, there are comments in the chat that now because it's moot, but it was still damning because he was basically saying, this is what I would have done and this is the reason why.
Well, not would have done, did.
Yeah.
No, did.
Did.
This wasn't a I would have done. This is I did. So right now the question has been deemed under the current laws to be contravening the Constitution, cannot proceed. The laws are going to change. Then the question will be reapplied, applied for, and then we'll see it move forward. But to give this judge some credit, he was within the bounds of that current legislation, which was bad legislation. But what this judge didn't write into there, which he should have, is Bruce Party was right. Okay, so we'll see him tomorrow. We'll talk about this tomorrow. As soon as the decision came out, I contacted him, and no, he wanted a copy, and he was very pleased that we're going to have a conversation about tomorrow. So don't disregard opinions you don't like. Sometimes the opinions are there. Go ahead and join Melissa McKee at the Bikers Church. Greg Wycliffe is going to be showing his movie, The Hate Network. He's premiering this all over the place. He's coming to Calgary on the 16th of December as well. And he's going to come back for Edmonton and others. I spoke to him already about doing some more of this. But this is about the Anti-Hate Network and how they're trying to use the definition of hate to go after everybody they don't like on the political right. They never touch the political left. And this is also funded by the current government. So one more step in the overreach game that they're playing here, where they're trying to shut us all down. And this has now gone all the way to religious speech. So you're not protected if your religion feels a certain way. So this is getting pretty nasty. In fact, we had a prayer about this yesterday at church.
Yeah, this is December 21st. They'll be there.
December 21st. Okay, yeah. So cool. The whole poster is there. Check it out. I know we're getting through this pretty quickly here. Jason Kenney, he made the second appearance today. He's still got that Ukrainian flag. What a goofball. He's saying this petition has never made any sense. It's playing with fire. I'm a patriot who supports a strong Alberta within the United Canada. I have been outspoken about the destructive, dismissive, or divisive potential of a referendum on secession. He continues, but here's the line that matters. So why in the world would Federalists give separatists what they crave, a vote on seceding from Canada? I thought that was quite the thing to write and put out there. Hey, Jason, your Laurentian elitism is showing. Why in the world, quote him, why in the world would Federalists give separatists what they crave, a vote on seceding from Canada? Give? Give? Boy, you're kind of laying out where your mind is. Give. You think the people of Alberta was given the opportunity to decide their fate? Man, you need to stop posting. You are giving all Albertans more reasons to leave your little elitist club you call Canada. So my point here is he's making a reason for us to leave, because he's kind of saying the quiet part out loud. We own you. We control you. We're giving you opportunities to separate. No, you're not, you Federalist. And also to our Federalists in our chat, why would you care if we leave? Well, the answer to that is because we get so much from you. If you didn't get so much from us, you wouldn't care if we leave. You care that we leave because you get so much from us. This is an abusive one-way relationship. So enough of that, Trevor.
Can I have some more?
Can you take a little bit less from me? There's a lot of reasons, Trevor, and you can have your opinion, and I got mine. I also want to highlight here this JJ McCullough guy. I thought he was kind of cool.
Yeah, same. I was surprised.
Clearly he's Federalist, and he's watching too much CBC here. His comment here is, when you read some news story about the supposedly all-powerful Alberta separatist menace, nice framing there, always apply the simplest test. Is there a single Alberta separatist named? And is it someone other than Jeffrey Rath? In my experience, the vast majority of stories fail this test. This guy is a goofball. Okay, he's a nothing burger. He's a goofball, because not only is he framing it as a separatist menace, he's saying separatists got to be named. There are thousands of people that are fighting for independence. Thousands of leaders that are fighting for independence. Hundreds of them have been through our show. So my post to him is, tell me that you only read the CBC without telling me you only read the CBC. JJ here is either choosing to be ignorant or it's genuine. I thought he was cool for standing up to the Liberal bills that attacked content creators. Now he's fallen on the streets of Vancouver like many others have done. Sad, really. JJ, if you really want to be educated, look past the CBC and dig into Alberta independent media. There are thousands working towards Alberta independence. Because completely true. And he did stand up to the Liberal bills that were going after, I think, Bill 11, Bill 18. He spoke at the in the chambers for that. I think he was just trying to protect himself. That's all he really cared about.
He's a content creator. So yeah.
Yeah, he was just protecting himself, and he didn't really care about what party. But the way he speaks is exactly how CBC speaks, and his ignorance is annoying because there's tons of people who are involved in the independence of Alberta. So I just wanted to shoot back at him there. Alberta Independence Reason. How are we doing time? Okay, we're getting there. Alberta Independence Reason, 1798.
Nearly hitting 800. Oh, 1800.
1800. We're going to get there soon enough. Yesterday's ruling against the Alberta Prosperity Project's question came from Justice Colin C.J. Beesby, a federal Liberal appointee placed on Alberta's Court of King's Bench in 2022. Like every Superior Court judge in Alberta, he was selected entirely through Ottawa's process, not Alberta's. The judge ruled that Albertans cannot even ask a referendum question about their own future, but this directly contradicts the Supreme Court of Canada's secession reference and the Federal Clarity Act, both of which confirm that the province can hold a referendum on independence, and a clear majority on a clear question must be respected. Clearly, Ottawa's appointees are enforcing Ottawa's political interests, not Alberta's democratic rights. In a strong and free Alberta, our judges would serve Albertans under an Alberta constitution, not federal priorities. Our courts would protect the rights to decide our own future, not block the question before it's even asked. But one more reason the judge just demonstrated to us is why we should have our own judges. They should come from Alberta. They should be focused on our constitution. And you will absolutely see Albertans' rights come forward there. We're getting it. So we love her. True Seeker, Diana, made it onto Alex Jones' show, and not just remotely, because we've been on one of his shows, the War Desk or something like that, the War Room, something like that. But she was actually there physically. She went there and had a long conversation with Alex Jones, and we're very pleased that she's getting out there. So maybe the steps are: you come on the Levine show, then you get onto Alex Jones. Maybe those are the kind of the steps there. But certainly one of our favorite guests we've ever had. She's a lot of fun, and she speaks her mind. Tiana has a raw, in-your-face, honest approach to the truth that is refreshing and unfortunately rare in Canada. I can see why many hide from her. Much love and respect. She may be joining us on Saturday at the mashup. She'll let us know on Wednesday if her schedule, because she actually works. She works in the minefield or the oil fields in Texas. She'll let us know if her schedule lines up, and if it does, we'll hear from her on Saturday. I think we'll kind of, how much do we have? Oh, we're only got a couple left here. Good.
Yep.
All right. So Thomas Lasakic, he's making the news again. Forever Canadian organizer claims Albertan independence movement fueled by foreign interference. This is their go-to. This is their go-to. Well, you don't like what you guys are doing. It must be foreign interference.
Yeah, Albertans are foreign to Canada. Correct.
So what he's talking about here is a $500 million loan that's rumored. Once Alberta reaches that stage, it's rumored. And if Alberta needs it during the transition, the U.S. may step forward with that kind of loan. Again, these are all rumored, and these are all after Albertans decide something. He's still framing it like this is on the table now. It's being used to separate Canada from Alberta. That's not true at all. This guy is just full of lies. And he's positioning himself to be probably the strongest NDPer in Alberta, because he's even now an advisor to Carney about Alberta separation. Like, this guy has absolutely nothing to do with Alberta separation. So I'm not sure why he's an advisor in any way, shape, or form. And he's got an interesting photo on his bookshelf. Can't quite make that out, but it looks like some military guy with his hand in the air doing that salute that a lot of people don't like. So I'm not sure who it is, what it is, but it's a really odd thing to be having back there. In either case, my comment to him is Thomas Usakic is a lying dog-faced pony soldier. Steal a line from Biden. Because he's just absolutely lying. That's unfortunate, and I hope people see right through that, because all he's trying to do now is prop his position, which is to keep Canada forever with Alberta. And that would be a horrible policy to have with Ottawa, to say we would never leave. And then Jeff Rath, he posted he would like to personally thank Thomas Usakic by insulting all of the Indigenous men and women who are members of the Alberta independence movement with his racist and sexist characterization of them as angry, armed to the teeth white men who should be deemed national security risks. This is a quote from Thomas Usakic. He has hardened our resolve. By joining forces with Mark Carney, Usakic just brought another 100,000 Albertans to Alberta independence. Thank you. Yeah, and that's quite the comment. And he's basically turned into a Kevin because, well, he's a white male, but here he is saying white males are the problem, armed to the teeth. What do you see this guy even talking about?
Yeah.
Not a single person have I ever seen in the independence movement has ever talked about being armed in any way, shape, or form. It's a democratic process that he proved.
Yep.
You get a petition, you get an application approved, you get the signatures, and then you move forward. He's already proven the path. So I'm not sure what this goopball is talking about. I find him annoying. But he's going to become, just like Jason Kenney, probably the best thing for the independence movement the more he talks. So Carney, Usakic, and Kenney, you put them into a room and we're leaving.
Yep. Yeah.
We're leaving. And I did want to highlight one response that I gave earlier this morning to Max, because it was brought up by Jeff. Let's see where it is. Max, there we go. So Max is highlighting what Jeff highlighted at the end there, that the CAs are going to lose the ability for the nomination approval process. Just like Corey Morgan mentions in this post from Max, the provincial leader always had the power. Okay, they always had that power. We've seen it being used before, where the leader of the party can veto any nominees. So that's always been there. Now, Jeff did respond to, basically said the same thing he said here on the show, that it's consolidated in the power, just like Trudeau did, and he can refuse any MLAs. Well, for Trudeau, it would be MPs, but on the provincial level, MLAs. But my response, I kind of dig a little bit deeper into it because I don't really have a problem with this. So I put, hi, Max. It's true that Bill 14 reduces the independence of constituency associations in the candidate approval process, but I'm actually comfortable with this shift. The purpose of a leadership race, so let's move to the leadership side now, is to set the party's direction and mandate. And once members choose a leader, the party needs candidates who support that mandate so it can actually be delivered. We've already seen what happens when the alignment breaks down. During the push for COVID accountability, Premier Smith, through the Davidson report, faced open resistance from several Kenney-era MLAs whose priorities didn't match the mandate members voted for. Because remember, we voted for COVID accountability. The internal conflict made it difficult for the party to stay focused and slowed progress on issues that mattered to the membership. Just to give you guys some insight, she had to step away from pushing that, or else they were going to throw her out, her own caucus. But there were all the Kenney-era ones who were responsible for these mandates and the response to COVID. So they had blood on their hands. And because of that, it was difficult for the party to deliver on that mandate. So this is what I'm highlighting here. And this is happening now. This is not a hypothetical. I'm not like that judge that makes up things. This happened and is happening. So I continue here. Stronger alignment between candidates and the leader helps prevent those divisions that can render the party ineffective. That said, it doesn't remove the influence of CAs. So come on, they're not killing CAs. So pay attention to this part here. They still hold the most important check and balance in the system. They can initiate leadership reviews and replace a leader who isn't respecting the mandate or isn't acting in the party's best interest. What happened to Kenney? What did Jeff just say at the end here could happen to Danielle? The CA still have the power to replace the leader if they're not following the mandate provided or in the party's best interest. But they actually have the ultimate power. So I continue here. That keeps real accountability with the CAs while ensuring that nominated candidates are actually aligned with the direction the membership chooses in the leadership race. Bill 14 also strengthens the authority of the people themselves by repealing the sections that allow courts to block citizens' initiative referendum questions. Albertans now have a clearer path to put major issues, including independence, directly on the ballot. That means the mandate for the leader is no longer shaped only through internal party policies or processes, but also through democratic direction from the public. in that sense, Bill 14 doesn't just align candidates with the leader, it aligns the leader with the people, giving Albertans the ability to set or correct the province's direction through referendum without having court interference. My whole point here, because I'm sure some people are kind of annoyed, because the implication that Jeff kept saying was the grassroots people. He also said the other side's mad.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's an establishment side that's very annoyed with this because the Jason Kenney ones that are in there could also be not welcome after the next election. And to me, that's a step in the right direction, because Danielle was stopped on the COVID accountability issue. And there's others, okay? There's others, but stopped on the COVID accountability issue because some of the people responsible for the COVID accountability problem is still there. So my hope is this is not an attempt to go ahead and remove the grassroots effort, because she was grassroots. It's the other side, the ones that are upset, the establishment, the ones that don't want accountability. Those are the ones who are now going to have difficulty going forward. Now, if we see that she's removing grassroots people and only putting an establishment and becoming a dictator, well, the CA still has the power to do a leader review and basically recall the leader of the party. So I'm comfortable with this direction because I'm not seeing it the same way as others are seeing it, as an attempt to shut down independence or grassroots. I'm seeing it as a way of opening up the mandate of the leader and aligning the MLAs with the mandate of the leader so they can finish it. And the mandate is provided by the party and the people. So having strong CAs that actually put in people that get in the way, that's a problem. I see that as a problem in delivering the mandate of the people. So that's my perspective on that one. I'm sure it's not going to be popular, but that's my opinion. I don't get to make the laws.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't even get to vote on them, but that's my opinion on that one. And I don't see it as a big threat to the independence movement. If it was, why is she opening up the door? The court just said no. So why open that door then? I don't think she's standing in the way of independence. I think she's providing the choice to the people, and she's been firm on that one.
Yep. No, I agree. And step by step.
What are you, new kids on the block?
Yeah.
So sorry, folks. I kind of rushed the news there because Jeff, he's very, very good at taking 10 minutes at a time to explain the weather. So absolutely wanted to get some of that news to you. But that's my perspective on some of those. I think Lusakic is a goofball, but keep talking. He keeps helping. He's aligning himself with Carney, which is going to be politically devastating for him here in Alberta. I think he wants to become the new NDP leader because that's where he's headed. And maybe he'll have a falling out with Nenshi to try and take over. That might help too.
Let them fight it out.
That's fine.
Yeah.
Yep. And I do think Bill 14 is a net positive for Alberta and independence. You may not like every single change in it, and some of it may concern you. But at the end of the day, the provincial party leader always had veto power. So, and we saw this. I think Nadine Wellwood's an example of that, where she couldn't get through, even though she won the nomination. Tim Hoven and others. There's other examples of that. So this isn't something new. But what I do think is good for it, if it works out that way, is when there's a mandate provided to the leader from the party, the MLAs are also aligned with that mandate as well, because that's how you get the job done. Who here listening right now would not have liked to have seen Dr. Davidson's report come forward and some accountability happen from it? I think all of us would. I can tell you right now, because I've spoken to him and many others in the party, it's been stopped by the Kenney era MLAs because they got bloody hands.
Yeah, my biggest beef with all of this, I've said, is the liability issue. I'm coming from the insurance industry. The whole thing of the silence for so long, the head in the sand, has been the liability. They know the exposure, they were told.
Yep. And again, if the leader becomes a dictator and starts ignoring the party and the will of the members of the party and the people, there's other processes to get rid of them. And you're about to see one of them kick off, recall.
Yep.
I think Danielle's going to get her recall notice this week, it looks like.
So now we got some good news. We could the event.
Oh, right. Thank you.
I put the link in the press.
Yes,
chat if you want to put it up.
Yes. So the event is now live on our website, so levineshow.com. So go ahead and go to levineshow.com. I'm going to bring it up here.
And what I'm going to do, everyone, is I'm just going to drop the link because I'm giving you the Eventbrite link. I'm putting in the chat now, so you can go check it out.
Yep, you can get your tickets now. So levineshow.com. Let's bring this up. Thanks, Fabe, for reminding me on
You're
that
very
one. We
welcome.
worked hard this morning to get this done for you.
You did, bless you.
Well, you helped me log in. So the posters there, it's fundamental truths. So join Canada's leading voices as we confront the fundamental truth of science, law, rights, culture, and governance, charting a clearer path forward. This is taking place in Red Deer. The current venue is Legacy Center, but depending on ticket sales, we might move it to Legacy Place, which is the other side of the parking lot, so no big deal. As a ticket holder, you'll know exactly where we're going to be, but right now it's Legacy Center. Go ahead and get your tickets. It's $20 for general admission, $30 for reserved seat. What a $30 reserved seat means is you'll actually have a seat in the first few rows of the theater, and it'll be yours. So when you take a break, you can come back, it's going to be yours. And if you want general admission, you can just basically sit anywhere except for the reserved seats. Won't be two separate areas. They're just going to be the first few rows will be for the reserved seats, and we'll make sure you have a seat the entire time. Go to levingshow.com to get the tickets. It's January 10th, 2026. Doors open at 1. We should be done by 7. So a nice long event. And who are our speakers? We got Dr. Jack Mintz. He's an economist. He's not a COVID doctor, but he's an economist out of the University of Calgary. Realizing economic prosperity will be his topic. Leighton Gray. These are all confirmed. This is what took a little bit of time to get this done, but these are all confirmed. So Leighton Gray, understanding indigenous relationships. I'll get there, folks. Mia Hughes, exposing gender ideology. She's been on a show a couple of times. You guys love her. John Carpe, the president of JCCF. He'll be defending charter freedoms, a topic he knows well. Bathsheba Vandenberg, global human rights. So she's a human rights lawyer, and you've seen her around the POEC. She's Detective Helen Gruse's lawyer. She's done a lot of great work. Professor Bruce Pardy, confronting state power. He's absolutely been doing a good job, even when it's difficult to have the conversations. He's been having them.
Yep.
Sean Buckley's joining as well, recognizing legal erosion, because this has been happening for a long time on the administrative level, Health Canada, everywhere. He's been seeing how it's been eroded, and he wants to get back to the fundamentals. And then Teresa Buckley is going to close the event with some conversation about action through messaging. You're going to inspire us to take the next steps. Once you sat there and listened to these wonderful speakers, what do you do with it after that? There'll be a 1-hour Q&A, so it'll be driven by Nadine Wellwood. She'll go around the whole event as it's happening to collect questions, because we want to be very effective and efficient on the questions. So it's not an open mic, but you certainly can provide questions. And we're not filtering your questions. We just want to make sure they're questions. So when you see Nadine there, go ahead and give her your question. We'll get it to the panel at the end, and we'll start the event at 2 p.m. with a prayer from Pastor Sean Ham. Go ahead and click on the Get Tickets. If you didn't go to Eventbrite, they'll take you to this page where you can go ahead and get yourself set up with some tickets. So go ahead and do that.
Yeah, please and thank you. Hope to see you there.
Yep, it'll be a good event. We got a powerhouse list of speakers for that one.
Yeah, coming from Darlene here. Great people attending. Wow. That's what I'm hoping.
It took some work. It took some work. So please, hopefully you can make it to come and see that. There will also be vendors there selling their books, a little market as well. So if you want some natural products, those kind of things will be there as well.
Yep.
But get your tickets, because we are limited on space. And if we do fill up that center, we might move it to the place to free up some more tickets.
If available. Yeah, I'm sure we'd like to do that.
We're working on it. But we have the center booked. So we're definitely going to do that.
Yeah. So Jason's been working really, really hard to get it all confirmed, set it up, and we look forward to seeing
the flights and times, and it's difficult to get 8 people together in one spot, but we got it.
Got it.
We got there.
All right, and then on a side note, we're going to be switching over to our locals area, so go ahead and subscribe, please, and thank you. That'd be great to see you, and then we'd also love to see you in the backstage, where you can become a supporter. You can become a member for free, but if you could become a supporter as well, then you get to see the extended version of the show. And we'd like to see that. Yeah,
absolutely. And Debbie, go back to the beginning. Jeff jumped on early, and we did him the first 45 minutes, and now we've got the rest done, and got to get to their supporters and get on to the rest of our day.
Yep. So hold on a second. So Eddie, I'm going to pick the button now. Everyone have a fantastic day, and we'll see you tomorrow morning. Bye from me.
And also bye for me. You guys have a wonderful day. Take care of each other. Love you all, and God bless.